Hello learners. Today I will be talking about earthquakes and tsunami. I am Professor Bhaskar from Department of Environmental Science and Engineering, Guru Jambheshwar University of Science and Technology, Hisar. After listening to this unit, you should be able to define the term earthquakes, describe the different types of earthquakes, explain the hazards associated with earthquakes, and understand tsunami genesis. Earth processes have been operating throughout the geological history. These processes become hazardous only because they negatively affect us. Now the question is, why do these processes occur? The earth is a dynamic system involving complex interactions of the internal and external processes. And if you see, the internal processes are primarily responsible for the movement of plates, earthquakes and volcanic activities. The external processes are responsible for the other hazards like floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, droughts. Where is the source of energy for these processes? If it is an internal process, the source of energy is essentially radioactive, and if it is an external process, the source of energy is essentially the solar energy or the sun. Now, earthquake occurs when energy stored in elastically strained rocks is released suddenly. What does the earthquake indicate? The earthquake indicates that our earth is dynamic, and earthquakes help us to know about the earth's interior. Now, before I proceed with my lecture, there are some terms which you should be familiar with. Earthquake is sudden movement, part of the earth's crust. Seismology, it is the study of generation, propagation and measurement of seismic waves through the earth and sources that generate them. Seismometer, this is an instrument to record seismic vibrations. Now, seismograph, it is a graph which shows seismic vibrations at a particular area. There are two terms which are normally used. One is focus, which is the point of origin of earthquakes, and another term which is used is epicenter, that is directly above the focus on the earth's surface. You can see the diagram where focus is shown and where the epicenter is shown in this diagram. Now, plate tectonic theory is very important to understand earthquakes and volcanic processes. Now, what is this plate tectonic theory? Is that it is believed that the lithosphere of the earth is broken into 7 major segments known as plates that slide past each other over the plastic nature of the asthenosphere. Now, these plates behave like hard and rigid shell. You must have seen, just like you go in a mall, you must have seen an escalator, like that it behaves. The lithosphere is the crust and upper part of the mantle. It is about 100 km thick below the continents in the continental areas and 50 km under the oceans. Now, this lithosphere floats over the asthenosphere. There are some major plates and there are some smaller plates. Major plates are African, American, Antarctic, Indo-Australian, Eurasian and Pacific plates, and smaller plates are Andaman, Philippine plate and so on. Now, if you see this diagram, you can see below the lithosphere there is the asthenosphere, and this is a partially molten layer, and this can extend up to 700 km in depth. These lithospheric plates moves on the asthenosphere. Now, if you see the plates, the rate of movement of plate can vary somewhere between 2 to 10 centimeter per year on the underlying asthenosphere. Now, the question comes, why do these plates move? The plates move because of the convection currents upwelling in the mantle, which are the driving force for the movement of lithospheric plates. Now, if you see the movement of the plates with respect to each other, it may be any type of boundary, that is the cause for the occurrence of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Now, if you see, there are interplate earthquakes and intraplate earthquakes. Both are slightly different, and if you see, earthquakes that occur at the plate boundaries are referred to as interplate earthquakes. You can see between the plates. All earthquakes do not occur at the plate boundaries. They occur in the interior of the plate, and that is normally tectonically quiet. But earthquakes can occur, but these intraplate earthquakes are shallow focus earthquakes less than 30 kilometers. Normally, the recurrence time for these earthquakes is longer than interplate earthquakes. Now, I already introduced you to this term epicenter and focus. Normally, around the epicenter, highest intensity of the earthquake is observed, and that is why maximum damage to life and property is seen. As we move away from the epicenter, the intensity decreases and hence the impact of the earthquake also decreases. Now, the seismic waves which pass through the earth, there are two kinds, body waves and surface waves. Body waves are generated due to the release of energy at the focus of the earthquake, which move in different directions in the earth. Obviously, from physics laws, we know that denser the material, more faster will be the velocity. There are essentially two kinds of important waves, which are primary waves and secondary waves. Primary waves are faster than secondary waves. They are compressional waves. They are called primary waves because they are first to reach. And the primary waves can travel through solid, liquid and gaseous material. In this type of movement, the particles or the vibration is parallel to the direction of the wave propagation. The secondary waves are shear waves. They are displaced material at right angles to their path of travel. They are called secondary because they arrive later than P waves, and secondary waves can only travel through solid medium. The direction of vibration of these waves is perpendicular to the direction of wave propagation. Now, there are surface waves. Body waves I said to you, surface waves. Surface waves travel on the surface of the earth, travel slower than the body waves, and surface waves are most destructive waves. They have low velocity, low frequency, long wavelength. These include two types of surface waves, Love waves, you can see the diagram, which have a complex horizontal ground movement, and Rayleigh waves which have a rolling motion. Now, how do we measure earthquake magnitude and intensity? Normally in newspapers, you must have read about Richter magnitude scale. Measure the amplitude of the largest recorded seismic wave at a specific distance from the earthquake. Normally, this is assigned a number somewhere between 1 and 10, and it is in order of increasing intensity. It is to be noted by the learners that this scale is logarithmic scale, whereas Mercalli scale is another seismic 12-point scale that measures earthquake severity in terms of damage inflicted. In this scale, it describes the intensity of an earthquake based on its observed effect. Again, learners should note that this is a linear scale. The duration of the earthquake normally is few seconds to several minutes, and greater the intensity, longer the earthquakes last. Now, if you see the distribution of the earthquake, these are based on the plate interactions. The first one is the diverging plate boundaries. When the two plates move away from each other in opposite directions, for example, mid-oceanic ridges, and the earthquake, they are shallow focus earthquake. The focal depth is normally less than 20 kilometers. The second kind of plate interaction is transform plate boundaries, where the lithospheric plates slide past each other. They show strike slip motion on faults. They are also shallow focus, and the focal depth can be less than 50 kilometers. San Andreas fault of California is an important example of this type. Then there are converging plate boundaries. These are high focal depth earthquake somewhere between 300 to 700 kilometers, and these occur when two plates converge or move towards each other. Subduction boundaries, for example, ocean lithospheric plate which is pushed under ocean or continental lithosphere, or collision boundaries, for example, continental lithospheric plates collide. So, you can have deep focus earthquake in these type of boundaries. So, learners, you can see depending on the plate boundaries, you can have shallow focus earthquake or deep focus earthquakes. Now, why does an earthquake, why is it caused? The first one can be volcanic reasons. When volcano is occurring, because of the vibration, it can cause some earthquake. The most important one is the tectonic one, which I have already explained, is when the crust is subjected to strain. It is the plate tectonics, the movement of the plates, which causes earthquake. Movement along fault planes, crustal displacements, they cause it. Can human activities cause earthquake? Yes, we can induce the occurrence of earthquake. For example, filling of new reservoirs or dams, there can be reservoir induced seismicity. For example, we can inject fluid into deep wells for waste disposal, that may cause vibrations. Also, we know that detonation of atomic explosives underground can also cause earthquake. So, you can see these are the causes of the earthquake. Now, if an earthquake occurs, what are the hazards that can occur? Obviously, the damage to the buildings, that is why they say the buildings kill people and not the earthquake. If you are inside a building, the building may collapse and you may get affected. Liquefaction, in which the buildings sink into the ground, soil liquefaction. Then you can see ground displacement. Then you can see fault zones. If buildings are over fault zone, they will be affected, but if they are adjacent to fault zone, they may not be affected. Again, you have aftershocks. Normally, you have 4 shocks which occur before the earthquake occurs, and aftershocks, this occur due to difference in stress pattern in the areas near the epicenter. The earth's crust needs to adjust these changes, and these are aftershocks. Again, they can cause effects. Then there can be mass movements because of earthquakes. Landslides can occur. There can be flooding, secondary effects, there can be fire, contamination of water, changes in ground level, and if this earthquake occurs in ocean floor, this can also cause tsunamis. Now, can we predict earthquake? This is a $1 million question. Everybody is interested in this, whether we can predict. Long-term prediction is based on about instances where earthquakes have occurred in the past. That means we identify the seismic gaps, and in that area we can expect future earthquakes, but we cannot pinpoint when it occurs. Relatively short term methods are there for prediction, but again they are not short term in real sense of human time scale, but monitoring the process that occur in an area near an earthquake prone fault. For example, uplift of ground, their tilting, I will explain this in the coming slides, shift in water levels, emission of radon gas, drop in electrical resistivity of rocks, unusual radio waves, and interesting or strange animal behavior, force shocks. All these are some of the precursor events before the earthquake occurs. Now, uplift of ground and their tilting. Measurements taken around active faults sometimes show prior to an earthquake, the ground is uplifted or tilted due to swelling of rocks caused by strain building on the fault. The cracking in the rocks may lead to small earthquakes called foreshocks. If you have foreshocks, there is a possibility of getting earthquake. The word possibility is important, but they are important. For example, prior to 1975 earthquake in China, the observation of numerous foreshock led to successful prediction of an earthquake and evacuation of the city of Haicheng. The magnitude of the earthquake which occurred was 7.3 and destroyed about half of the city and 100 million inhabitants. But because we evacuated based on foreshock, this resulted only in a few hundred deaths. Now, there can again be shift in the water level in the wells. As the rocks become strained in the vicinity of the fault, changes in groundwater pressure can occur. Because of this, the groundwater can move higher or lower, and when they move, they cause changes in water level in the wells. Another interesting case which has been found is emission of radon gas. Radon gas is an inert gas produced by radioactive decay of uranium and other elements in rock, and this radioactive gas, the concentration increases before the occurrence of earthquake, because the deformation resulting from the strain may force the radon out and lead to emission of radon that shows up in well water. Increase in the amount of radon emissions have been reported prior to some earthquakes. Now, another interesting study has shown drop in the electrical resistivity of the rocks. In general, we know rocks are poor conductors of electricity, but we know water is an efficient conductor of electricity. If micro cracks develop in the rock and groundwater is forced into the cracks, This may cause electrical resistivity to decrease, in other words electrical conductivity to increase, and this is an indicator of some short term prediction method. Now you can see another two methods are seen. Unusual radio waves. Just prior to the Loma Prieta earthquake of 1989, some researchers reported observing unusual radio waves. Where these are generated and why these are generated are not known, but research is underway. Another interesting thing is that animals seem to have a sixth sense and they show strange animal behavior. Prior to magnitude 7.4 earthquake in Tianjin, China, zookeepers reported unusual animal behavior. For example, snakes refusing to go into their holes, swans refusing to go into the water, pandas screaming, or hens refusing to lay eggs. It appears that they have a sense that some kind of activity is going to occur, but these are also can be used for short term prediction. Now in India we have IMD and INCOIS. IMD has the seismic network, they have the National Center for Seismology and it comes under Ministry of Earth Sciences, and the responsibility is to monitor earthquake, whereas INCOIS, Indian National Center for Ocean Information Service, they have the National Tsunami Warning Center and the responsibility is to monitor and provide information of tsunamis based on predictive models. Now Bureau of Indian Standards is the nodal agency in seismic hazard assessment and zoning of the country. Based on whatever data has been collected, the country has been grouped into 4 seismic zones: zone 2, 3, 4 and 5. And if you see zone 5, if you see the map which I will show you in the next slide, is seismically the most active region, while zone 2 is least. You can see from this map around 59% of the Indian landmass is prone to some kind of seismic damage. So you can see this map, the red areas are the ones which are most highest grade in seismic activity. Now in India there is National Disaster Management Authority. They gave the guidelines for management of earthquakes in 2007, and what was the vision of this guidelines? Zero tolerance to avoidable deaths due to earthquakes. And what was the mission of this? To formulate guidelines for the preparation of plans to reduce earthquake risk and minimize the impact, reduce the loss of life and damage to property caused by earthquake. Now we know from the map that 59% of the landmass is prone to earthquakes, and even during this international decade for disaster reduction, which was observed by the UN in 1990s, India witnessed several earthquakes, major ones, for example Uttarkashi earthquake of 1991, Latur earthquake of 1993, Jabalpur earthquake of 1997, the Chamoli earthquake of 1999. Then these were followed by Bhuj earthquake 26 January 2001 and J&K earthquake 8 October 2005. Now tsunami, they both are related, earthquake and tsunami, series of giant waves that occur after some kind of disturbance under the sea or ocean. And in the ocean or sea, the disturbance can occur due to an earthquake or volcanic eruption. Waves are created and this results in tsunami. Tsunami in Japanese means harbor wave. These waves can travel in open sea, and you will be surprised to know that these waves travel at 450 miles per hour. When these big waves approach the shallow waters along the coast, they grow to great heights and hit the shore. Now you can see the diagram how the fault line in the ocean has moved and how the tsunami is generated, and these waves can be as high as 100 feet and can result in lot of destruction on the shore. Now prediction of tsunami, early warning systems have been useful. Already there is Pacific Tsunami Warning Center by National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and they have an international network of seismographic tidal stations around the Pacific Ocean basin that transmits information to the center located in Hawaii. You can see that we also make use of satellites to transfer the data information and predict the tsunami. Now, the National Disaster Management has guidelines for tsunami 2010. The Indian Ocean tsunami of 26 December 2004, which devastated coastal communities in Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Puducherry, Andaman and Nicobar Islands, prompted the Government of India to take pioneering steps to establish appropriate institutional mechanisms for effective disaster management in India. Now, learners, I would like to summarize by saying that we cannot stop the earthquake and tsunami from occurring, because these are natural process, and these natural process, when they interact with human life and property, they become hazardous. But what we can do is understanding of the natural hazards is the first step towards disaster preparedness and response. For any hazard, we have to understand the nature so that we can devise a strategy to mitigate it. It should be clear to you now that we have no control over geological process, but we can make attempts to predict and reduce the hazards to life and property. Thank you very much, listeners, for the patient listening. Thank you very much.